Hey everyone, and welcome to our December Childless Chats Over Cocktails webinar. I have a lovely lineup of guests tonight, and I'm really excited to talk with you all about navigating the holidays and sharing some tips and strategies for how to get through some difficult situations over the next month. So just to start, if you're unfamiliar with me, I'm Katie. I run the website Chasing Creation. And I am child-free after infertility, and just started this webinar series last month, so this is our second one. And a couple of just housekeeping tips before we get started. You should have access to a chat box on your computer, so if you want to ask a question, you can ask that. They come up as anonymous. No one else will see them except for the panelists. So feel free to ask a question, or if you have a comment, feel free to join us. So for you guys to practice, I would love for you to share what you're drinking tonight. I am drinking sparkling white wine, which that's all I was going to say, but then before, when I was talking to my guests, they said I should be totally honest with you guys and let you know that it is very cheap sparkling wine that's peach flavored from Trader Joe's. So in the spirit of honesty, cheers. So now we'll go ahead and do guest introductions. So I'm going to start with Brittany Williams. So Brittany, do you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Brittany, obviously. I am from Virginia. I have 2 dogs. I'm married. I have PCOS, which is where my infertility comes from. Me and my husband have been trying for like 2.5, 3 years. And in June, we recently had a chemical pregnancy. So that was rough to get through. And then found Katie on Instagram, and I always wanted to tell her this, but I never really knew about child-free life or having, I guess, the desire to have a child-free life. So she kind of changed my perspective of, if we stop trying, that's not me giving up. That's just me saying, this is not my path. So we're kind of just in limbo right now, but I am super duper excited to be a part of this webinar.
Awesome. Thank you, Brittany. And did you share your website?
I did not. I just thought about that. My website is rightfullysobritney.com. I blog a lot about mental health and like life in general and struggles, and about infertility. And you can find me on Instagram at rightfullysobritney, and that is my Facebook page as well.
And her website's awesome. I have read a lot of her blog posts, and they're fantastic. So you should definitely go check her out.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's go to Michelle.
Hi, everybody. My name's Michelle Soto, and I grew up in New Jersey, but now my husband and I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I spent my 30s like just unsure about whether I wanted to have kids or not. We were living in San Francisco. It was so much fun. Like, there's plenty to do. Having kids was just something I would thought about later down the road. But then when I got to my late 30s, I wasn't convinced I wanted to have them, but I also knew that I feel really bad if I didn't try. And there's a lot of guilt around that. So then we started trying, but I was 39 at the time, so that's already difficult. Fast forward like 3 years into the process, we started doing IVF. So we did IVF for 3.5 years. That is very hard. Emotionally, mentally, your time is not your own. You're on the calendar. And physically, I don't give myself enough credit for what I put my body through. Mm-hmm. So, in that process, we had a miscarriage at 21 weeks. Like to this day, if I thought about it long enough, I'd start bawling right now. But that was very hard. And then I still had embryos left. So we still had another 2 years of working through the process at that point. And we were pregnant in May for about 2 months, but then it didn't work out, which sucks. However, I spent a lot of time in IVF, like working on like mind, body, and soul just to get through the process. And then when it was over, like that whole ability to do that started leveraging into how am I supposed to deal with life now? And I was on Instagram one night, hashtagging like child free. Like I just didn't know where to go. And somehow I came across Katie's Chasing Creation. And I just started looking at it. And that's how we met. Katie organized a book club, Living Life Unexpected by Jody Day joined it, and then Katie graciously invited me to come today. And I'm so super happy to be here. There's cocktails involved, right? Brittany has to tell us what she's drinking, but it's a school night for me, so I have water with Meyer lemon slices, you know, keeping it clean.
It counts.
However, if I were to be drinking a cocktail, I would be drinking Kettle One Botanical with cucumber and mint. It's basically
get real. You can just have like a shot, like a.
We could do that. We could. Let's see how things go. It's the Serenity Spa meets the club. So that's my plug.
Well, thank you, Michelle. And you guys are in for a real treat with Michelle because I got to know her pretty well over the multiple weeks that we did the book club. And she is just phenomenal in her outlook and how she has processed her experience and just has so much wisdom and love to share. So I'm so grateful, Michelle, that you joined us. And Brittany, we did skip you with what you're drinking. So
I forgot. I'm sorry. I have wine. I have Stella Rosa Black. It's one of my favorite red wines like ever. It's so good.
Awesome. And I think we've only got one person in the chat box. Let's see. Someone at home is drinking Stella Rosa Rosé.
Had it last night.
Rosé all day.
Rosé all day. I love it.
All right. So Loree, that brings us to you.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I am Loree Johnson, and I am in this really unique perspective because I am a therapist by training, and I've been in the field for over 20 years and worked with children at one point in my career, and then adults, and then couples and women who are struggling with infertility. And then I kind of had this unique perspective because then I started to have issues with fertility as well while I was also working with people in that population. And so a little bit of background, I'm married, and my husband and I have been together for almost 10 years, married for almost 9 of those. And I like to call myself a little bit of a late bloomer, so to speak. You know, I got married later in life, you know, after 35. And then, you know, everyone really assumed that because I hadn't gotten married and, you know, I didn't have children, that I didn't want them. And so when my husband and I decided to get married, I knew I didn't want that door closed. And you know, even though he does have children from previous relationships. And so, you know, and I didn't even know if I could get pregnant. And so I decided to try a few months into our marriage, and I got pregnant pretty easily. And sadly, that pregnancy ended in a miscarriage at 9 weeks. And so had to heal from that. Ended up, like, the following year, I had a surgery, you know, based on I had some issues with fibroids and endometriosis, similar to a lot of other women in the, you know, kind of trying to conceive community. And so I had some fibroids removed, and then the doctor was like, you gotta go right away and get pregnant, otherwise, you know, it's going to be pretty difficult. And so, you know, being the dutiful patient, we, you know, kind of did what we did, and I got pregnant again with our son. And that is the loss that I probably talk the most about because that is the most significant. We did lose him at 15 and a half weeks. And that really kind of started this journey of bewilderment, uncertainty, and just didn't know which way was up. And so really having to straddle that, and then also, you know, working clinically was quite unique. And so I was definitely processing a lot of that in my own therapy, and also with my tribe of people that I kind of put together for support. Then after that loss, I was told to go straight to IVF because of my age. And so did that, and did a combination of full stimulation and then minimal stimulation protocols over the course of a year and a half. And that, you know, ended in just a chemical pregnancy. And so by that point, I was just like, wait a second, you know what, I need a break. But I was like, let's just see if we could try naturally. And the doctor basically said that my chances of getting pregnant naturally at that point were next to nil. A test, I had the HSG test, which actually showed that both of my tubes were blocked. So I was like, all right, well, you know, I'm not going to be able to get pregnant naturally. I'll take a break. We'll go back to IVF. And then a couple of months later, we were on a trip, and I came back home, and I'm like, I had those familiar symptoms that you have when you're pregnant, and come find out I was pregnant again, which felt quite miraculous. And even though that pregnancy obviously ended in loss as well. But that was the last of my pregnancies and the last of that particular part of my journey. But my experiences have really helped me, kind of figure out like how I wanted to give back to this community, because when I was going through a lot of these struggles, it was hard to piece together support. I think it's hard to piece together support as a therapist to begin with, because you know everybody and in your area, and so you have to be really careful about who you reach out to. But just being a woman, and just trying to find ways to get support that felt really meaningful or really challenging. And so when I kind of, turned this corner with my grief earlier this year, I just really felt this sense of lightness kind of help, or kind of like happen, and that really translated into me working differently with clients, and re-engaging in the infertility community in a way that felt really meaningful. And then Katie, our paths kind of crossed, and I'd heard about you actually from a friend of mine, who I won't say, but she I think she knows you. And so it was just really, kind of like the powers that be that really connected us all together. So I'm really excited to talk with everybody and kind of share just as a person and not just as a therapist.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And what are you drinking, Loree?
Oh, yes, I totally forgot. I am drinking, it's a signature cocktail from our wedding called Violet's Rain. And if you can't tell, purple is my favorite color. But it is part vodka, part elderflower liqueur with muddled blackberries and blueberries.
I'm jealous. It looks so much better than my peach sparkling wine.
I wish I had that.
And tell us where we can find you, Loree. I don't know if you practice just if you're doing mostly online stuff or if you're seeing people in person, but if you want to tell us a little bit about where people can find you.
Absolutely. I am definitely a lot more active on Instagram now at drloreejohnson.com. And I do have a website that is also drloreejohnson.com. Wait, I think I just said that wrong. Instagram is not .com, but I think you all get the point. And I do work with clients kind of face-to-face in the Los Angeles area. I do have 2 locations, but I do provide services virtually as well.
Awesome, thank you. And we have had a couple of other chats come in. So we got someone drinking champagne.
Nice.
We got another person who was on the same wavelength of me because she did vodka and peach LaCroix. So I feel like we were really feeling each other with that. So you've got some sparkling wine, hot buttered rum, coffee. Interesting choice for this late at night. Maybe it's earlier where they're at. And then I love that we actually have one guy that's listening. You guys, my Instagram followers are only 3% men. So people always say like, why don't you have more resources for men? And I'm like, because they don't reach out to me. So it is one of
my husband's.
I know it is Michelle's husband, but he is on and he's drinking beer. So so cheers to maybe our only male that has joined. All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump into some of the discussion points here now. And I hope everyone appreciates I went full sparkle for you guys tonight in the spirit of holiday topics. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is dealing with awkward interactions. And I put this at the top of the list because when I asked you guys what you were dreading most about the holidays, when I asked on Instagram, this was by far the #1 topic that came up. It was like questions about how do I deal with intrusive questions? How do I deal with people not understanding that I'm grieving? It was like just those really awkward comments that you get either about when are you going to have kids, or if people know you're struggling with infertility, giving you all that unwanted advice. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists, how can we prepare for those interactions and intrusive questions? And then another piece is like conversations that are only focused on kids. So, if you have any great ideas about how to change conversation topics. So I know that's a little bit broad because it's a few different questions, but maybe if there's a piece of that you feel like specifically you want to speak to. So I don't know, do any of you want to go first?
I'll go first.
All right.
I love that this question's on here because when I was reflecting on it, it's been something that I've been contending with ever since we got married. We got married, I was 32. And I think the first thing out of people's mouths is, well, when are you going to have kids? So And I've always looked at this question as a diagnostic, kind of like my car dashboard telling me how am I processing it, because however I feel about it when somebody asks me this question is really just how I'm feeling inside. So there have been years where I get this question and I'm annoyed, just annoyed. Like, why are you asking? And so I'll give a curt, we don't have kids. I mean, it's so awkward. It cuts any conversation down. And probably at that time, I was not comfortable with myself and however I felt about having kids or not. And then there was a time where I didn't want to feel embarrassed about myself. Like I wanted to be more open, but it was still a little muddled. So there were years where I would say, well, we're trying. And by the way, now I'm going through IVF and it's a whole bunch of injections and this and that, like almost filibuster them to death with my detail. Because, hey, by the way, I'm working as hard as I possibly can. And you better know that. They didn't need to know that. I think I needed to know that I needed to know that I was trying my best. So it's a projection. Mm-hmm. But what's lovely about this coming holiday season is that as part of my healing process, like the thing that I'm seeking is just connection. Mm-hmm. And at this moment, like the vibe that I want to share is just, if someone were to ask me this, I'd say, we tried really hard for a long time and it wasn't in our path. Like, I'm not trying to cut them down. I'm not trying to prove anything to anybody. It's just facts. And what I think could come from it, because I've had it happen, is I'll get emotional connection. Like maybe they aren't going through infertility, but everyone's got disappointment. So I have been pleasantly surprised by when I tell people that, what I've gotten back. And it's not always your first cousin. It could just be this, acquaintance. And then all of a sudden you have this amazing conversation you did not expect because you were just that vulnerable and you allowed it. And it's so freaking powerful. I love it. But like 10 years ago, the answer was no, stop talking to me. So anyway, I just wanted to share that there's just different levels to it. And just to be open with wherever you are in your process with that is how you're going to respond. So, and I don't want to ball hog. So I know Brittany and Loree want to jump in.
Yeah, no, I love that, Michelle. And I agree. I think that my answer over the last 5 years since I've been married I've been married 14 years, but from when we started infertility is when the question actually started bothering me. Like before that, I was just like, yeah, someday. And I think it's also changed a lot for me. So a lot of it has depended on where I'm at emotionally, like who the person is, how strong I'm feeling that day. So I've kind of generated a couple different answers of ranging from ones to just shut the conversation down and move on to like trying to raise awareness or go more in depth depending on how I'm feeling. So I'm with you on that. All right, so let's see, Loree, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll definitely go. I mean, just piggyback on what Michelle said, because, I feel like, grief can definitely, I think shape how you handle the process and how you respond to those awkward situations really does, I think, reflect where you are in your process. And I think when you're feeling really defensive or you're not necessarily sure how to respond and, like not sure, you don't want to make other people feel uncomfortable, or at least that was one of my feelings that I struggled with, because when I first, started to tell people I had a loss or I announced it, it was just like, oh, and, you would just see all the energy leave people's faces. And, and then I wasn't at a point where I was really comfortable talking about it even more. And, then the conversation definitely shifts, or, do you have kids? And no, they're on the other side, or, it just like going through a range of how do I acknowledge, what I've been through without necessarily, having that be the focal point of the conversation either, because nobody wants to be on womb watch and, and as well, it's just really uncomfortable. So I feel like what was really helpful for me too, like Michelle, you talked about, really figuring out what you were seeking. And I think for me, I also had to think about just, giving myself permission to be awkward for a bit, and to be in transition. And, I was putting a lot of pressure to have it figured out, to have the right response. And so, just know that it might not be graceful at first. And this process isn't graceful, and it doesn't have to be. And so I think when I had that, I shifted into that perspective, I was able to ease into it a little bit more and really check in with myself about, well, what do I feel comfortable sharing right now? And, and sometimes it was just easier to say, nope, not yet, or, how are you doing? And then I'm always good at, shifting the conversation back, and, and that made it a little bit easier for me. But I think just honoring where you're at and not apologizing for it.
Yes, and I love that, because I think there were times in my journey where I felt like if I didn't give them a full, authentic, truthful answer, then that meant I was somehow not acknowledging everything I've been through. It was somehow dismissing the pain that I've been through. And it took me a while to realize that part of self-care and me taking care of myself was being able to know when, like, it was okay for me to just give a dismissive answer or change the subject, and that didn't mean that I was dismissing what I've been through, but that not everybody, you don't owe everybody your story or your full emotions or your full,
exactly.
like, so I mean, if you're looking for support and you want to go there, then absolutely, like, you shouldn't feel like you have to shy away from telling your story. But if you're just in a self-protection mode where you really don't want to talk about it, like, you don't have to, you don't owe anybody that information. So I love that. All right, Brittany, what do you got for us?
Similar to what Michelle and Loree said, definitely when you're kind of in the trenches of it or you're still trying to understand it, being asked then is totally different than being asked like when you kind of figured yourself out. So I remember like being bothered by it. I remember people asking me when my husband first got married. It was okay then because we weren't really trying, and I could use the excuse like I'm still in grad school, like we not trying to have kids. But when the fertility issue started to arise, it would be like that could ruin my whole entire night. And I hated that. I hated that it, like, literally, if I was at a party, that's all I was thinking about for the rest of the night. So then I had to figure out, okay, how am I going to navigate this? Like, I can't let this keep ruining, like, me being at events. So I would just say we're trying, or I'd be like, keep praying on that. Like, we're trying to, get somebody here by next year. And then I'd be like, but how you been? Just to kind of change the subject. But now I'll fill out who I'm talking to, and that will determine my answer. Like, if you're just trying to be nosy, then you're probably going to get a short, but you need to mind your business response. But if I feel like, it's somebody who's genuinely asking, then I might share a little more. I will say, once I share on social media that I was having issues, like the questions from my family pretty much stopped. But it did allow for other people to start telling me, hey, this is my story, or hey, you probably never know this, but this is why we don't have kids. So then it kind of like opened the door for people to like connect with me. So I appreciated that.
Yeah, that's so true. Absolutely. And we did get a question in the chat box, which I think is a good follow-up to this, because it is something that I know is like the next question usually is like getting asked. Well, this specifically asks about, if you get a follow-up question about adoption or foster care. But I think that also what could be included in this is like unsolicited advice, or have you tried kind of answers. And I think these are really hard. I remember certain times of my experience where I would get asked, it caught me off guard. It took everything I had to get through just trying to answer them simply without crying or having like a full-on meltdown. And this could be like a total stranger that's just trying to make small talk, right? And like they have no idea that I'm about to have like a nervous breakdown in front of them. So, I get through that first initial, like, get my answer out, and then I get thrown back with, oh, well, why don't you adopt? Or have you thought about foster care or surrogacy or whatever it is that they are going to give me advice or ask about. So I don't think we have time for all three of you to answer, but if one of you feels really strongly about this, if you've got a good suggestion for how you then can manage some of those follow-up questions, because I think that is something you have to balance. Like, if you're real and vulnerable and tell the truth about like, well, we're struggling, or, and share your actual experience, then you are opening yourself up to these follow-up questions because people want to fix it. They want to give you advice, and it's just, you can't stop them from that. It's just what's going to come back at you, unfortunately. So I don't know. Do any of you feel really strongly about this? And
yeah, we've been talking about just our personal approaches to when we get the questions asked, right? So that's a reaction. But, like, I've lately started thinking about how I play offense on this, and it's just understanding the person talking to you, like meeting them where they are. Why do they ask that question? It's up there with the, how's the weather? How's your job? are you married? Are you gonna, like, why do we have this 10 list roster of core questions? And you know why? Because ultimately we're trying to find connection with one another and find common ground. And yet I don't know if we're all taught to have really open-ended, probing, more thoughtful questions. So the easiest thing to do is just go to these rote questions. So we could be prepared by just having kind of like the standard answers, and we talked about it. But, you know, when I think about that other person, what have they gone through? Maybe they've never imagined a life that is different without kids. Like maybe they had a very traditional upbringing. So what would that be like? If they're from the older generation, there's no way they have the level of opportunity we had, you know, pre-birth control, pre-Title IX, like pre-women in the workforce. But if we look at where we are now and what's to come, you know, like in college, most of the, like more than half is women now, right? And with all of that comes what's going to happen with infertility. It's similar to what's happening to us. Like, I just know it's going to get better. Like there's going to be more awareness because of a lot of the work like people like you are doing, but it's just understanding where they're coming from, right? Why are they asking their questions? They don't have anything better to say.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that can be, if you look at it from that perspective of like, this person is just trying to make small talk and find connection with me, if you can then change a topic to something that you can connect on. So a lot of times if I'm using this strategy, I'll say, you know, no, I don't have kids, but I have 7 nieces and nephews that I adore. Let me tell you all about them. Or, you know, you could say, oh, no, but I've got a puppy. Or no, but I spend a lot of time volunteering or doing knitting or whatever it is that you are passionate about and want to talk about. There's no harm in like just steering the conversation away. So yeah, okay, great. Well, I want to make sure we have time to get into our other 2 topics. So our next one is talking about self-care. So I know the holidays can be stressful because, you know, you tend to spend a lot of time with family and there's a lot of expectations put around how you should act or feel or traditions. And it can just bring up a lot, especially if there's this expectation that you're cheerful and in a festive mood when it may be at complete odds with the grief that you're feeling. And so a lot of people, when I asked on Instagram too, said that they were in the middle of processes right now. So they may have just barely had a failed IVF cycle, or they just barely had some kind of a loss where knowing that going into holidays was very difficult for them because they knew that there was this expectation of how they presented themselves at different parties or events and with family, where there is this and a few people brought up too that their family may not acknowledge the fact that they're grieving or that this was traumatic for them. And so I guess my question is, are there ways that you can practice self-care during the holidays and make time for yourself so that you are making sure to protect your emotions and your mental health throughout the holidays? So I'm going to maybe go in a different order here. So Brittany, do you mind if we start with you?
I am a lot more unapologetic about who I spend my time with and who I want to be around. I am that person that if I am having a horrible, horrible day, my mental health is not right, I will not go to an event. I'm sick. I'm sick. To me, I can say that. So I think it's important to know who you're going to be around. I think you have to be honest with yourself. If you're not okay, that's fine, but you have to acknowledge that. I think you set yourself up for failure if you try to go into like a holiday party or go with your family and be like, oh, let me put on this face and like I'm fine. Somebody asks you a question, then you have a breakdown in the bathroom and everybody's like, okay, what in the world is going on? So I think it's just important to check in with yourself and make sure that you're okay. And if that means you have to change up what you do normally this Christmas, then you have to be okay with that. Be honest with who you can be honest with and know where your support lies. I think we get too caught up in trying to please other people and make sure everybody else is okay with how we present in our interactions, and we don't really take enough time to like fill out ourselves and what we're going through. So I just feel like it kind of starts with you and knowing what you can and cannot handle and knowing who you should and should not interact with when you're not in the best space.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Let's see, Loree, can we go with you next?
Sure. Just, to kind of piggyback on that, because I echo everything that Brittany said. There's nothing worse than being at a function and then, getting triggered and you're just a puddle of tears and then trying to figure out, again, you don't want to be the focus of everyone's attention in your most vulnerable moment. So I'm the queen of pivoting, and I recognize, kind of recommend that to my clients. And so what pivoting to me means like, even before the event, you're checking in with yourself. And because sometimes you can check in with yourself and you are so good to go and you're excited to go to that event. And then you just never know when something is going to trigger you. And I feel like that's been one of the hardest struggles with this whole process, is because you feel, and it's like this grief attack kind of comes, and so pivoting is just huge. And it is basically having an exit strategy, and recognizing that you just need to have one. And that's just what goes along with this territory. So it could be going to the bathroom. It could be just, oh, you know what? I forgot something in my car. Let me just, and then you're in the car and I'm texting with some people in my support group, which, who might have already known like what's going on. And so they'll just kind of text me back words of support. And then, that's, I'm able to kind of get through, the event. But it's just having your own plan about what you need to do and what's right for you. So pivoting is huge for me.
I really love that. And I think, like when I go home for the holidays, I'm from Utah. So I go home to Utah and I'm staying with family the whole time. And so it does have, I love it. I love being like totally deep in with everybody and I get to spend such quality time with everyone, but it can feel like there's not as many spaces to kind of find for yourself than when I'm at my own house and I have all my comforts around and I can just have it quiet when I need to and have my own space. And I used to feel guilty if I didn't spend like every minute with my family, because I'm like, oh, I traveled across the country to get here. I need to like spend all my time with them. But I have, like, my husband and I have the last few trips, like if I do need some downtime, we'll just go get coffee together, just the two of us, and just take a while to kind of decompress. And I used to feel really bad about that. But then I realized like, no, this is just like part of my self-care and what I need to kind of have some downtime to like process and get geared back up again for like all the momentum that happens when I'm around everybody. So, all right, Michelle.
Yeah, I love everything that you guys have all said. I've tried all of that, especially Loree, the exit strategy. People probably think, wow, she goes to the bathroom a lot. But you need those timeouts. Take it, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, to your point, Brittany, saying no, only, show up for the games that you want to play, right? But I do want to get at there's many times where it's just obligatory. You got to go, right? And so how can you set yourself up for success when you have to go? And I like to look at a whole week in my calendar, and I kind of feel like this is a lot about just how much energy you have, right? Mm-hmm. And it's very literal. Like if I thought I was going to run on the treadmill for 30 minutes, that's literal calories burned. But a lot of energy is being used when we're trying to contend with these situations, right? Like we're getting exhausted mentally and emotionally and drained by just trying to put that best face forward. And so if I have something that I feel like could have a lot of triggers and landmines, I'm going to look at my whole week. Can I get sleep? What do I need to cut out that isn't really mandatory? Should I just get food delivered and not like have the stress of like cooking dinner? Like these all sound really little, but I'm going to bank more energy because it's required when I have that obligation. And you want to show up for that, right? Like aside from the awkward questions, that might be like 10% of the total time. It's not always going to be about you. And why are we even there in the first place? Like, what is the essence of the holidays? It's to be around like people we love. And if you're up for it, go for it. You don't know if you're going to have that again, like, being in the moment. And so I think I like just setting up energy, right? Like, and having enough for the uphill climb that some of these obligations can be.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think just to tag on to that, I know you said there are like some things that you really have to show up for, but I might argue that like those are very few and far between. Like what's really going to happen if, you take a night off and just say, I really just can't this year. Like I'm in the thick of it. I really can't show up to this. And I do think that like being able to allow yourself to say no, especially with the holiday season's hard because it does come with so many expectations of, you know, what we think we're supposed to do or what feels mandatory. So I think showing up when you can, but knowing that no is almost always an option. You know, that if you really cannot do it, don't do it. Like, the world's not going to end. You got next year. So someone put in the chat box here, does anyone have a code word with their spouse to get the time out that they need, especially if you're in a public or family setting? And that's not something I'd ever thought about, but I really like that idea of having like kind of a secret code word that you can give to your partner that might signal to them that you're needing that space and that they can support you in that. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so let's move into our last question, and then we're going to do some Q&A from the audience. So as we're going through this last section, if you guys have questions from the audience that you guys want to ask us, go ahead and ask them in the comment box, and we will we'll get to those. I do have, we have one waiting for us, so I have one on hold that we'll get to, but we only have one question right now, so we have other people that want to ask questions. Go ahead and get those in now, and we'll get to them in about 10 minutes or so. So our last question is on creating new traditions. And I think this is one that I had not really thought much about until the last like year or so. And I think it can be a really powerful one because, as you guys all know, a lot of the traditions around holidays revolve around children. And that can be a really difficult thing to try to sit through. Like, I know that is one of the most emotional times for me, is like, I always go to my sister's house when on Christmas morning and watch my nieces and nephews open their presents, and it's such an amazing thing to be a part of, and I'm really grateful that I get to be a part of it because it does allow me to have that experience where I'm able to watch that and be a part of it. And so I love it and I would never want to miss it, but at the same time it always brings up those feelings of, wow, I thought I would be doing this with my own kids. And I'm already getting a little bit teary thinking about it, so I'm just going to pass the torch here to, let's see, Michelle, let's start with you since I don't think we've done that yet. So the question is, have you started any of your own new traditions, or do you have suggestions of how someone might be able to create their own traditions that are not as kid-centric?
Right. I think you have to acknowledge there's going to be a lot of kid-centric stuff. There's no way around it. But I haven't intentionally done it, but then when I look back, I'm like, oh, this happened. So you're going to have a lot of kids stuff, and you kind of need to balance that with adult-oriented activity, right? And that'll just make you feel like, hey, I'm an outcast in this world that's completely oriented around the nuclear family white picket fence. When you have your own activities that have nothing to do with that world, all the better. So, you know, when I was thinking about this question, I look back, and 2 years in a row in December with one of my girlfriends who also is childless but married. Like last year we saw Erykah Badu, and it was around Christmas. And then this year we saw the Donna Summer musical, and it wasn't even intentional, but I just, you know, there's so many activities happening in December and I still wanted to do these things. And so now I'm thinking we should just do that. And could you do that? You know, we asked a bunch of our other friends to go see the Donna Summer musical. They couldn't because they were going to their child pageant type stuff, right? So, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? But we have a different kind of life, and there's unique and special things about it too. And just to be, to not judge one better than the other in any way. They're just different life paths. You like went up the Candyland board game a different route than everybody else. So, you know, 2020, I want to find something.
Yeah, I really like that. And I will say, if you guys at home have not heard of the Reddit, the subreddit that's IF Child Free, that was one of the first research sources I found when I was dealing with being child free after infertility, and it is fantastic. There are some phenomenal people in there that are all child free after infertility, and I know a lot of people in that group have recommended or have actually done years where they'll say, okay, this year we're not going home for the holidays, but we're going to go to like an adults only resort in the Bahamas, and we're spending Christmas there. And I think that is such a cool thing to do. Like, I don't know, my family might kill me if I started doing that, but I don't know, it might be something to consider because we do spend, it costs us about $400 or $500 per ticket to get home to Utah. And I have to save up a lot of vacation days to go for a week or a week and a half at Christmas. So I have thought about like where I could get to for, $1,000 combined tickets and a week and a half of vacation. So I don't know, something to consider. And then the other thing I want to just plug real quick too is that one of the things that gave me the idea for this topic as well was listening to the Influence podcast. So it's run by two women who, I know one for sure is child-free after infertility. The other one does not have children. And they did a whole podcast episode about creating new traditions and how to navigate the holidays. So if you guys haven't checked that out, please do. It's awesome. Okay, so let's go ahead to Brittany. Your thoughts on this one?
So we kind of created a tradition unintentionally. We have Christmas breakfast at our house with our parents. They know our situation, so there's no talk of kids, us having kids, or little babies. We're just exchanging gifts, laughing, drinking mimosas, whatever the case may be. And then we house hop, so, we might see kids here and there, but where we spend the majority of our day and evening, there are no kids there. So it's just like relax, it's chill, we have fun. So yeah, kind of intentional about where we are and how long we spend our time. So see kids when we see kids, but the majority of our day is like a child-free zone.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's nice. So it sounds like it sounds like you didn't necessarily do it on purpose, but you already had these traditions created.
Yeah, it worked out that way.
Ooh, I love that. I would love a mimosa breakfast on Christmas morning. Thank you. All right, Loree.
I don't really have much else to add because I feel like what I do or what we have is like a combination of what Brittany and Michelle have shared. I am so blessed to have, so many different communities that I belong to. And I have a group of women who are child-free, some not by choice and some by choice. But anyway, they've been my touchstone along the way of like what life looks like outside of this community. So we kind of get together monthly and we'll do something fun. And then I have my supper club gals and we'll get together and do something fun. And, and then, I know that I'm going to have like an amazing kind of meal, over the holidays because my husband is this kind of like amateur gourmet cook that, he just loves to eat. So I'm eating really well. And so I'm excited. And, we're kind of getting into the menu and I asked to be a sous chef and he's like, no. And so we have these like fun little like moments where we just really get into menu planning and, and creating this experience. And then I kind of like to play around with decorations. And so that has become our, just like our little haven. And like I said, my husband does have children. So we do have our Christmas earlier and they are older. But at a time when they were a bit younger, this was a little bit harder to navigate, but still, they've just been so beautiful in the process too. But, I definitely have a lot more control over, when I see children and when I don't, and, just doing so unapologetically and just, trying to have fun in the moment and the experiences of, what this time of year has to offer and all that it has. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. And I did just want to, before we move into the question and answers from our viewers, I wanted to just also bring up that there is this really cool thing I found out about a few years ago that a lot of like churches do called Blue Christmas. And so if you guys are not familiar with those, if you Google your city with the words Blue Christmas, you might be able to see if those come up. I'm personally not religious, but I love the idea of them and I think that I would feel comfortable going to one. But it's basically where congregations will create space for people who are dealing with grief or sadness during the holidays. And it's usually a nighttime service where you can just go and be with other people who are grieving. And it's, I guess, like a nice sanctuary or space to be able to be around other people who are in your same state that are not going to expect that kind of cheerful self that you may or may not be able to bring. So just wanted to give that a little bit of a shout out because I think that could bring a lot of comfort to people if there's one going on in your city.
Katie, along those lines, when I was preparing for this, you had mentioned, if you're religious and if you happen to be Christian, you celebrate Christmas, the birth of Jesus Christ. When I was preparing for this, it dawned on me, like, Jesus didn't have kids, but he was 100% full of love. I don't know. I think about that a lot during the holidays. Like, that dude didn't have kids, right?
Very true. I will also bring up though that and this was something mentioned by Rebecca of Rebecca Reclaimed. If anyone follows her on Instagram, she's fantastic. But she did a post a few weeks ago about how Jesus is like the ultimate miracle baby story. And I will say, like, I'm not religious at all. I am atheist, but my family's religious, and so we actually reenact the nativity scene every year on Christmas Eve. And there is this song that is always sung by whoever's playing Mary that year. And it is the worst part of my holiday season every single year, because it is a song about, from Mary's perspective, of her holding this baby and just being so amazed at having this baby in her arms, and about how she's going to have to give him to the world, but for this one night, he's all hers. And it's just like this very like touching, like mother, brand new baby story. And it just kills me. I break down every single year in tears. Getting teary just thinking about it right now. It's awful. Like, I mean, it's a beautiful song, but it has become such like a negative part of my tradition where I just have to like brace for that every year. So I don't know if anyone has suggestions of if it's okay for me to just bail for 10 minutes during that part. I don't know.
Like soundproof headphones.
Seriously, just not listening for a while. I'll be back.
My favorite.
Okay, so let's jump into some of our questions. And I know we won't have time to get through all of them, especially if we have all three of you answer. So I'm just going to do the same thing where I'll pull some questions from here. And if someone feels really strongly that they have a great answer, we'll kind of switch off here. So I see one here that I know I've gotten on Instagram a number of times. So this is, do you have tips for dealing with pregnancy announcements that tend to pop up around Christmas?
The dreaded pregnancy announcements. I think one of the ways that I dealt with that and still deal with that too, again, checking in with yourself. And if you're still really vulnerable, you might want to silence the person for a bit. You don't have to unfriend or anything like that, but just be mindful of, your use, just because the thing about social media, it's a great connector. And I think that's how we all kind of came to be here today. But the flow of information is such that sometimes we don't have control over that. So if you're still in a very raw kind of place, just honor that. I hate, like when people are saying they need to be in a certain place, or they start shooting on themselves. And it's like, this is where you are. So if, you need a little bit more control over the flow of information, then, take a little break for a bit, take a deep breath, stay away for an hour or two, or however long. It doesn't mean that you can't come back, but just allow yourself to experience the feeling, and nurture that in whatever way that makes sense to you.
Awesome, thank you. So we had someone that, this isn't a question, but more of a remark that I really liked on the tradition piece. So someone said, my husband and I have a tradition that we do family things on Christmas Eve, and then on Christmas Day we spend the day in just relaxing, just the two of us plus our dog. We binge movies all day in our PJs. That's our new tradition. It doesn't allow for any sadness on that day, or if we do get sad, we're in the comfort of our own home together. So I think that's really nice, and that may be something that, as years go on, they may not need that as much, although maybe they just really still enjoy it and want to continue it. But I do think like there's, like I said earlier, there may just be years where it's like not doing it. Like I just can't, and I'm just gonna opt out and do something else. So I really love that. Somebody else asked, how do you deal with the fact that you are the one expected to travel as a family member with no kids? It's really starting to get annoying. Basically, how do you assert yourself as having the same importance? So this person said that they've chosen to no longer travel to family functions because it's never reciprocated. So I don't know if anyone has a good answer to that one.
I suppose, to your point, Katie, you don't have to do it, someone online has this great tradition, it's working for them. So we have the option to say no, but yet you also, they're your family. You do want to spend time with them. You still love them, right? But so maybe you can reframe and do something different. So in the summer, maybe you can organize renting a beach house and spend time together in that way, because I feel like that's more neutral territory. The Christmas story is very, you know, at least commercially, is very specific around gift giving and children and, you know, the whole image, you know, Norman Rockwell painting. Like, there's something about Christmas that's very family oriented, but that doesn't mean that you don't love your family. You just need to participate in a way that's going to work for you. So that's, you know, sometimes you have to get a little bit bigger with your outlook on how you can handle things, because maybe just it's off limits in December.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
All right, so we have actually just 2 more questions in here. We have like 10 more minutes. So if you guys at home have other questions, continue to send those in, because we'll have time for a few more. So one of the ones that's here is, how do I handle people assuming that I'm the one with the fertility issue without pointing fingers? My husband has 3 children from a previous marriage, but he got fixed and then had it reversed and the surgery didn't work. Not to point fingers, but gosh, it sucks when people assume that I'm the one that isn't fertile.
You're gonna have to be blunt and tell them that it's not their business. You don't walk around, and one of my therapists actually told me that. She was like, you don't walk around asking people their medical history. They shouldn't feel comfortable doing it to you either.
That part.
It's just not, it's not okay. Like, they should not figure out a way to say it. Don't say it how I'm saying it, because I don't want you to have any issues, but you're just gonna have to be assertive about letting them know, like, thank you, but no thank you for your advice or whatever they're trying to say or do. It's just not their business.
You know, not to get that person more riled up, or Julia who put the question in, but that speaks to a lot of how all of this responsibility, whether it be like fertility, child rearing, like they put all of that on women, right? Like
yes.
All of that, like, and that's before the child was even born. And, you know, obviously we don't have kids, but I know from my friends that have kids, there's just like so much expected of women, period, right? And it's like starting with just a question like that. It's like, that's one of a million types of things like that.
Absolutely.
I probably just made Julia more angry, but
Yeah, well, and I mean, I would say too, though, that like, if I will say, it seems like a lot of the emotional aspects of this often fall to women. And so I would say, like, if it's maybe his family that's asking, and this is something where, okay, actually, let me rewind. You don't owe anybody information about medical histories or what's going on or whatever. So if you don't want to share information, don't share it. But maybe if it's his family that is causing a lot of issues with it and coming to you with this, that may be something where maybe it is something that he needs to step in and help manage some of that instead of putting it all on you as well. So
it's a bad issue.
I mean, I just feel like a lot of times it is women that end up getting kind of, like, we're the ones that are going to get asked more. We're the ones that have to fill a lot of those questions, handle these awkward situations. I know men do get asked as well, but I just don't think it's as much or as intrusive.
Definitely not.
Okay, so the same person also asked, how do you handle bosses that think you don't need time off around the holidays because you don't have kids?
That's a great question. I mean, I work for myself, so I don't necessarily have that issue per se, but I hear about it all the time. And I think just, you know, being really clear about boundaries, you know, what you need. And so if you need some time off, and if your boss says, well, you know, or I don't know how that request might even come, but I think just, you know, clearly stating, you know, this is what I need to you know, to do, or what I need for me. But, I know I've heard a lot of that, you know, happen for a lot of women, you know, just my child-free friends. Yeah.
I will say, for me, I'm unapologetic about needing a day. So if I'm here on the 26th, I'm not working the 27th. Y'all gonna have to figure that out. But at least, like, there needs to be, like, somebody needs to alternate with somebody. So if I'm gonna take the L on the 26th, then somebody's gonna have to do it on the 27th. So yeah, maybe seeing if they can alternate, you can alternate with somebody, but yeah.
if you had to think about it from the boss's perspective, like what's their priority, right? It's like coverage during the holidays, like take away the fact that you are processing not having kids and let's just like get back to work. They are trying to figure out what's the coverage. They're trying to figure out, are we going to be shorthanded, and like strategize around that. And you'll feel better too, because you're not focused on this emotional grief you're dealing with. You're just getting work done.
I think it's really, isn't it more though? I mean, I definitely understand that piece, you know, from a coverage perspective. I guess I'm just wondering, you know, if you're the one who's constantly expected to make the change, you know, that feels, you know, like even having that knowledge is helpful, but, you know, it's like that burden is still on you to kind of like, you know, fill that gap. And so, you know, I think there's something to be said for being a team player, and I'm all about that. And also, you know, just being mindful too, because that's, you know, in some ways potentially taking people for granted when we're not really, I don't know. I mean, you know, it could, I'm wondering if that's, you know, how people might feel too, if they're not really kind of having the same space that people with children are kind of given, but I don't know.
And I think it's just that prioritizing of being made to feel like your time off to enjoy the holidays, or, you know, be with family, whatever that looks like to you, or just you have this stuff that other people are getting, that you're not as worthy of that, or don't deserve it as much, or it doesn't matter as much to you because you don't have kids. And I mean, I just feel really lucky I don't have to deal with this, because my boss is amazing. And so I it's not something I've had to deal with, but I know it comes up a lot. So hopefully something in our answers here gave you some suggestions on how to handle that. Okay, so somebody wrote, Katie, I know you've spoken about travel anxiety due to period issues. Christmas anxiety on top of this is just very intense. How did you manage in those years? My most triggering days are usually the first few days of my cycle. So I will say, anxiety is something I've talked about a lot. It's something I have always struggled with, and it comes in waves. So some periods of my life, it's really can be very debilitating, and other times I like it a lot better. But I'm totally with you on the period issues. Thankfully, I had my hysterectomy 2 years ago, so it has gotten a lot better, because a lot of my anxiety was around health issues and not knowing how I was going to feel when I had to travel. And so I'm not telling you to go have a hysterectomy, because I know that's not in everybody's plans, but I do still get anxiety around travel and just in general. So therapy has been a huge support for me. I've been really open about the fact that I have seen, you know, multiple therapists throughout my life, and have just found that to be very helpful, and it has given me some of the skills that I need to manage anxiety better. But for just practical, like how do you get on that plane if you're having a panic attack? Like I do have a prescription for Ativan, which is something that I've worked with my healthcare providers to, you know, determine that that's something that I need. I take it when I know that I'm having a panic attack, and that has been very helpful for me at times when, over the years when I, you know, have had really high anxiety, but I have to get on a plane, or I have to be doing a work event, something like that. So I don't take it very often, but that has been very helpful. So that might be something, you know, depending on your own anxiety needs, that you might want to discuss if some type of medication would be appropriate. I know everyone has different feelings about that. But outside of that, you know, there's a book that was my Bible for a while. It's called The 10 Best Anxiety Management Techniques. And I can't remember the author's name off the top of my head, but it's fantastic. And it gives very practical, like when you start to feel anxiety, here's something you can do. So I also rely a lot, before I ever take any medication for panic attacks, I always start with trying to do things more naturally. So I'll go through my breathing exercises. I'll do all the things that I've learned to help try to calm myself down first. And it's only if I cannot get myself to a place where I feel some equilibrium again that I may take like half an Ativan to help me just come back down. So I think that's part of it. We talked a lot too about if you're at an event and you're feeling that anxiety, for me, giving myself permission to take breaks. So just excusing myself and maybe going and laying on a bed for 30 minutes to just try to get into a better space. Those are all kind of techniques that I've tried over the years that have been effective for me. but I know, you know, the hormonal piece of it, I totally get you, because I still have an ovary. So even though I don't have a period, I still get all the hormonal shifts of a period, which sucks, because I'll have days where I'm like, I know I'm on my period. I can just feel it, even though technically I'm not, but I still get those hormonal transitions. And I'm with you. Like, my anxiety is always worse at certain of them as well. So, all right, well, we are just about out of time here, so I guess we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you all for my guests, all three of you. This was awesome, and also thank you to everybody who joined us as guests. A couple plugs for where you can find my guests. So on Instagram, you can find Brittany at Rightfully, as in writing, W-R-I-T-E, Rightfully So Brittany, and then her website is rightfullysobrittany.com. For Dr. Loree Johnson, you can find her on Instagram at Dr. Loree, L-O-R-E-E Johnson, and then also on her website, drloreejohnson.com. And then Michelle, your Instagram is private, so I kind of stopped plugging it, because I'm like, oh, people are just gonna be private. So I don't know if people want to continue. All right, well, so last on my list here is just a plug for my next webinar. So it's going to be on Sunday, January 12th. The topic is embracing a life without kids, knowing when you're ready. So we're really going to talk about, for those of you who are still in your infertility phase, but are starting to get to that point where it's like, ooh, or maybe we're done with this and we need to move on. If you're in that space, that's going to be our topic. And I am so excited about our guests, because we've got Tia Jendusa from Infertile AF, and she also does child-free coaching, Joby Tyson of Tudum Global, and then Melissa of the Live Child-Free podcast. So all three women are child-free after infertility. They are all amazing. You can connect with them all on Instagram, but it's going to be a great conversation, and I will have the registration page up for that within the next week or so, and we'll start promoting it so you guys can join us there. But yeah, thank you again to my guests, and I hope that everyone has a great holiday season. I hope that these tips and strategies made you feel a little bit less alone and a little bit more empowered to take on the next couple weeks. So thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.